Hello everyone. Excuse the wobbly camera. It just needs to set a little bit. Okay. So I've let my pieces stay in this plastic for about a day or two. And I also left them out in the air to kind of set up a little bit. So a couple things you can do if you're rushing through this or you're just super excited to carve is you can put these outside in the sun and let them set up a little bit. And then you can start carving them. Of course, you're gonna have some of these, I call them little boogers, kind of happen when you're carving something that's a little bit too moist. So you might wanna wait a little bit longer, but at this point, we're basically in a leather hard state. So when I'm touching this piece here, you can tell that it's not really having any give. And I mean, I can definitely rub some spaces, especially if I made any finger marks in them or fingernail marks in them. But it's pretty much set up, right? You can touch it, you can be, of course, careful with it, but you're not going to change its overall form so much without the necessity of carving it. So your project was to make 3 of these. So I have 3 pieces here that I've made, and I just want to kind of give you a very quick example of some things you can do. So I have this board here. I got this one from home. I went to Home Depot and got some wood, chopped it up in some sections, and now I have these wear boards, as I call them. And so now this basically what it will do is it'll help me with my bottoms, and usually your bottoms tend to be a little bit more moist in your top lip area of your pinch pots because it's thinner towards the top and it's thicker towards the bottom. For structure, that works really well. If you make the bottom too thin, it could break or crack really easily. If you make it too thick, it could also crack because of the moisture content. So if you do have a bottom that's slightly thicker probably than your sides, what you want to do is always keep it on some type of a board. And what happens is the wood is going to absorb that moisture that's in the clay. So I kind of made this fun looking one because I'm going to show you how you can carve these pieces without just making marks in your cup. So I kind of made it kind of wonky for that reason. And I just wanted to show you, I went with a little bit of geometry on this one. As you may have noticed in the other video, I had shown that you can tap your pieces lightly on the table to work with them, to make them geometric. You could also leave the bottom round and then make the top geometric if you want to. I also have my examples that I was showing before, but just so you can see them a little bit closer. Here they are. This one is made with a B-Mix, which is a smoother clay than you have. It has less grog in it. It works really well in the wheel. It is definitely not completely rid of grog, which, as you noticed in your vocabulary, are pieces of bisque clay that has been fired but not glazed, such as this one, right? It would basically be this bottom clay. This is a bisque clay. This clay is clay that's been fired once, usually at a low temperature of about an 06 or 05. And once it gets bisque fired, it kind of gets rid of the majority of its water in the clay, and that's our next step with these. But then once you add the glaze to them and put them in a high firing, right, what you'll end up seeing is your piece will become more stone-like, and the color will get a little bit lighter and not as pink. The reason this one has some glaze on it and has that pink bottom is because this one is fired with a low fire glaze on it. And so that causes that. And as you can see, low fire glazes aren't perfect. They still chip a little bit more than high fire glazes. And some of our glaze in general is a little bit crackly depending on how it's fired. So a little bit about that. So I have my tools here that I got in my kit that you all should have gotten. I'm just going to give you a little overview, some stuff I didn't go over before. So when you start doing these carving pieces, I'm going to have a PowerPoint for you guys all on Canvas, so you can look at some examples of different cultures and how they use carving for anything from carving stone to carving wood. So keep that in mind and keep a lookout for that. So I'm going to show you how to use this rib here. This is your metal rib, right? It's sharp, so keep that in mind. It is sharp, just like your wire cutting tool is sharp. Your knife as well is sharp. So, just want to give you a little sharp acknowledgement there. So it's sharp, but when you want to do it, these is you have two of them. You have this wooden one and you have this metal one. And what you can do with this wooden one and this metal one is you can smooth things out. So if you notice that your clay is a little bit textured or maybe has more finger marks than you want, you can use this scraper here and you can just basically impress into it. I like to turn it at a little bit of an angle, and you want to make sure it's clean, because if it's not clean and you have a bunch of little pieces of clay everywhere, you will end up just wiping that onto your clay, and you'll see a little imprint of that. Now the cool thing about this is it's basically a concept that you learned when you were rolling your ball of clay on your wooden table, right, to make it round. So the clay is going to take up whatever texture you press into it, right? So since this is nice and smooth, it's going to be nice and smooth. If I had used something with a little bit more texture on it, it would be a little bit more textured. If I had rubbed it into maybe this wood here, if there's some grain in there, you'll get some grain on your pieces. Those are just things to note and to use in the future if you want to kind of play with that technique of really pushing in some textures into your pieces. So like I said, if you want your piece to be super smooth in some areas but have texture in others, you can use these ribs, bend them slightly, and go with the curves of your pinch pots and just smooth them out. Another cool thing you could use, which I don't have here, is a spoon. Once these get a little bit drier than this, you can actually take a spoon to them and burnish them just by rubbing that rounded back of your spoon on your pinch pots. All right, so those are a couple little things to note, but now I'm gonna move on to showing you guys how to do some carving. So depending on what you choose to do, of course you don't have to copy anything in the PowerPoint. You could go in your own direction. You can go as current, as contemporary, or as historic as you want, or prehistoric if you'd like as well. But what I usually do is I kind of mark out my piece first, decide what I want. I've gone with slightly flower piece here, so I'm just going to give you like a quick show of how I define a flower, and then I'm going to show you how I cut this guy here, so that I have more petals that are differing shapes. So I have this tool here, right? This is my loop tool, and it allows me to use it to carve, because what it does is it removes material, so it kind of chunks things out like that. And as you can tell, if you do have some of your pieces a little bit wetter than the others, you'll notice that you'll have an easier time getting material out without having a bunch of jagged edges when your pieces are leather hard and in this state. So I'm going around kind of chunking out some areas that need a little bit of TLC. And I'm deciding which petal is going to go forward. I'm showing you flowers because I like flowers. That's not required with this project. I'll show you a couple other things too in a second. I choose which flowers or which petal is going to go forward and which one's going to go back. And I just basically go in and I carve away that bottom one, creating a slight lip. And this slight lip is going to create the illusion that there is something underneath it and something on top of it. So you're kind of thinking about pushing and pulling. That's all I think about when it comes to creating anything. And using a carving technique is pushing and pulling.